Erev Tov, everyone. Erev Tov. It is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora. This is the Maimon Beit Knesset. Therefore, it must be Zeyde's Story Corner. Yep, that's right, Zeyde's Story Corner. And we're going to pick up where we left off last week with the story about the boy who wanted to be the printer or the writer. Yeah. The boy who wanted to be the printer and his friend wanted to be the printer, or the boy who wanted to be the writer. That's right. Okay. And his friend who wanted to be a printer. That you got it. Okay. Good. And we left off with a cliffhanger last week. We got through the first two chapters of the story, and we're into the third. So I'm going to start the third tonight. So we should probably just get right to it, shouldn't we? Yes, we should. Okay, so let me get you on your camera here. And there we go. Okay. So let me see if I can get centered in this screen. Okay. Maybe back a little bit. Okay. Let's call that good, huh? Okay. So, as you know, we've been reading the stories of Isaac Bashevis Singer. These wonderful stories, actually, and we left off on the one last week, and I forget what it is called, but we shall go on with the story beginning at chapter 3. Okay. The plan to publish a book had fallen through. First of all, Fievel had lost several of the rubber characters. Second, I couldn't find the right paper in my father's desk drawer. Third, each time we went to the study house, we encountered several youths swaying over open volumes. Fourth, I had found a way of getting rid of Ben Zion, and the whole story would have to be rewritten. Ben Zion was one of the characters in the story. Fievel said it couldn't be otherwise, but that Satan had gotten wind of our plan and had arranged it that I couldn't go to Jerusalem and bring the Mashiach. Remember, he had said that he had been told the name of the Mashiach, and if he went to Jerusalem and he said it, then Mashiach would come. But doesn't look like he's going to make it. Okay. We rode the streets of Warsaw with the impetus of those against whom all the evils have combined to conspire. My velvet cap was pushed back onto the nape. My red earlocks were drenched with sweat. The wide fringe garment peeked out from my unbuttoned gabardine. Despite my youth, my parents dressed me in rabbinical fashion. They wanted me to become a rabbi. Each time I passed a mirror, I grew frightened at my own appearance. My hair was as red as fire. My face and neck unusually white. You know, Rabbi Nachman had red hair too. Yeah, I have heard that. There's actually comments that said that, they talk about his wild red hair. Okay, so anyway. Now I lost my place. Okay. A frenzied eagerness shone from my blue eyes. I was fully aware that I was too young to probe into Kabbalah. I had often heard my father say that those who tried to study Kabbalah before 30 went crazy or slid into heresy. At times it seemed to me that I was actually crazy. Wild notions flashed through my brain, fantasies that I could not bridle. Now I was an emperor, and now a sorcerer. Now I donned a cap and rendered myself invisible. And now I flew to the moon and brought back treasures of gold and diamonds and a portion that rendered me wiser than King Solomon and stronger than Simpson. Instead of ringing Moshiach in my imagination, I became Moshiach himself. I blew the ram's horn so that its blast resounded around the world. I mounted a cloud and flew to Jerusalem, followed by hordes of angels ready to do my bidding. Fievel was taller than I. His earlocks were so black they appeared blue. His eyes were just as black, and his skin as swarthy as a gypsy's. Fievel's gabardine had perhaps 100 rents in it, revealing the liner beneath. His toes stuck out of his boots. Fievel was not only taller, but much stronger than I. He always carried a heavy stick torn from a bush ready to protect me. If some boys called me names like Shlemiel, Shmegege, and the like, Fievel would chase after him and beat him. Fievel was both my disciple and my bodyguard. He never grew tired of hearing my outlandish words and weird stories. At times, when I flew into a temper, I abused him, and I even gave him a shove or a slap, but he never struck back. At the same time, he waged a silent war with me. The rebelliousness of a savage against his master seethed within him. I could talk while we walked, but when Fievel wanted to say something, he had to stop. Before he could get anything out, he first blinked his eyes a few times. Even as he praised me, he implied that I fabricated things that made no sense whatsoever. He would say, "Since you say it, it's probably so." And his gypsy-like eyes flashed with mockery. Our plan to publish a book had gone awry, but I had a dozen other plans that day. We would establish a yeshiva for the secret study of the Kabbalah. I would be the rabbi, and he, Fievel, would be my beadle. I would become a heretic, and while I rode horseback on the Sabbath, he, Fievel, would follow behind and listen to my wisdom. Sounds like Avuya. Yeah, I think that's actually where they got the idea, was from Rabbi Avuya. No doubt, no doubt. Anyway, I would seal a covenant with Satan while he would bring the daughter of the Grand Vizier to me to my palace. What would you do with her? Fievel asked. Fly with her to the mountains of darkness. Oh, the things you say. I fear no one. As we crossed the Praga Bridge and our feet brought us of their own volition to Terespol railroad station, I was drawn to trains. We went out on the platform. A train was about to depart from somewhere deep in Russia. The black locomotive belched smoke, hissed steam, and gushed hot water like some other world beast. Its mighty driving wheel dripped oil. A huge gendarme, tall and broad, his face red and pockmarked, his deep chest hung with medals, paced to and fro, issuing orders in Russia. I said, this train is going to Siberia. Where is Siberia? Fievel asked. In the cold regions. The people there eat bear meat for 6 months. The whole winter, it's night. When is it Shabbat? Fievel asked. There are no Jews there. It's never Shabbat. What's beyond Siberia? Fievel asked. That's the end of the world. Giants live there who have 3 eyes in the center of their bellies. What do they eat? Each other. Chapter 4. In the evening, I came home tired and sweaty. I hadn't eaten my lunch. My boots were dusty. My mother angrily brought me a mirror to show me how grimy my face was. She asked me again and again where I had been all day, but I couldn't tell her. In the living room, the ceiling lamp was lit. We had a guest from Belgrade, a man who traveled around collecting subscriptions for the author of a holy book. His name was Wolf Bear, but he looked like a goat with his narrow white beard and rim-rimmed eyes. When he spoke, he moved his gums like a goat chewing its cud. He wore a patched gabardine and a soiled shirt with a wrinkled collar. He had eaten supper at our house, and he conversed in a bleating voice. My older brother, Joshua, also sat at the table, as did my sister, Hildele. Mother gave me what was left over from both the meals I had missed: potatoes with rice, dumplings with soup, a roast chicken liver, and a slice of bread. I was so hungry I bolted down the whole mouthfuls of food, while at the same time I pricked my ears to hear Wolf Bear's words. I heard him say, "You become depressed when you travel around, but you get to see the world. Every town presents a different face." The people of Zolochov are just as vicious as in the days they drove out Rabbi Levi Yitzhak in a ox wagon. In other places, they gave me a few gulden without any questions, but Zolochov, they wanted to know who the author was and demanded to see the manuscript. They sat me down and began to argue with me just as if I were the author. They also found errors in the text. A woman there all used to too much salt and pepper. They serve you a tiny morsel of meat and a lot of mustard. They eat rice pudding with horseradish. Everything there is done with sharpness. I go to a cobbler and ask if he can put half soles on my boots. So what does he say? Why half soles? Why not full soles? And why do you have to mention your boots? Where else would I put the soles? On your skull cap? His eyes were as piercing as a hedgehog's. They're all like that there, even the rabbi. You'll laugh at, but in no other town do so many thorns grow as in Zolochov. How far is Zichlin from Zolochov? Not far, but the people there are as soft as silk. I come to the rabbi and show him the manuscript, and he says, "Thank God the holy books are still being written in this world." Jews don't forget the Torah. In Zlitcha, the rabbi's wife herself made up a bed for me. They put honey on the table every day of the week. In Zolochov, it's hard to arrange a match. All girls become old maids. The young men go off to America and are never heard from again. I spent 8 days in Zilchin, and there was a wedding each day. What's the sense behind this, eh? On the other hand, why did Sodom become Sodom? One leprous sheep infects the whole flock. It starts with one vicious person, and it spreads to all. How did Warsaw become Warsaw? First, they built one house, then another, and gradually a city emerged. Everything grows. Even stones grow. Stones don't grow, Reb Wolf, my brother Joshua interjected. No? Well, so be it. There is a town in Volhyana called Makadol, where the sand is so deep that when you fall into it, you can't get out. You sink down slowly. They say if you put your ear to the sand, you can hear the cries of those trapped below. How can this be? How long can a person live underground unless it's a doorway to Gehenna? On the road, I met a man from the land of Israel. He spoke Hebrew, Aramaic too. He has seen the whole world, At first, he said that he didn't know any Yiddish. But as we got talking, I saw that he did know it. He had visited Shushan, the old capital of Persia. He had been to Mount Ararat to see Noah's Ark. It rests on the tip of the mountain. The eagles soar above it. You try to reach it because it seems so close, but when you get to the top, there's no ark. And that's how it is with all things. Illusion, or who knows what. In what connection do I say this, eh? Yes, now I remember. The man was riding in the desert, and he came to a place that was the gateway to Gehenna. You could hear the cries of the sinners. The earth is hollow there. There are caves underneath, and cities, and who knows what else. The earth isn't hollow, my brother Joshua said. Why not? Everything is possible. If you sit in one spot, you think it's the same all over, but when you travel, you get to see the wonders. I've been to Wilecek. They dig for salt there. There is enough salt for the whole world. They made houses of it, of salt, beds, even a wardrobe in Czechoslovakia. Again, a statue of the Virgin Mary stands on a mountain. She is completely of gold, and her eyes are diamonds. One time, a man stole one of the eyes and replaced it with a glass one. He was caught in the act and sentenced to hard labor. Yes, I know, Machuk, I piped up. Eh? How do you know? Rebbe Wolf Bear asked me. It was in the paper, I replied. Oh, so? In old times, children knew nothing. Today, they know everything. In Lublin, there was a wonder child called Yenka. And at the age of 3, he sprouted a beard. At 5, he gave a sermon in the synagogue, and the scholars came to debate with him. He was married at 7. When he reached 9, his beard turned as white as snow. He died at 10, an old man. Did you see this Yenucha with your own eyes? Joshua asked. See him? No, but the whole world knows about him. My father arched his brows over his blue eyes, and his red beard glowed like gold. Joshua, don't contradict. It isn't true, Joshua said. He turned pale, and his blue eyes reflected scorn. Have you been everywhere, and do you know the truth? Father asked. The world is full of wonders. We only know what goes on here. Only God Almighty knows what happens in other spheres. I didn't know the reason myself, but an urge to cry came over me. I barely contained my tears. I went to my parents' bedroom and I laid down on the bed in the dark. I suddenly realized, without knowing how myself, that I was too young to write a book. My brother Joshua often mentioned the word literature. He told Mother that each nation creates its own literature. That which Reb Wolf Bear now related at the table has to be the literature, I thought. But how can a beggar from a small village create literature? It was all one great mystery. I wasn't asleep yet, but my brain had already begun to weave a dream. Each time I tried to grasp it, its threads dissolved. I lay in bed, and at the same time I rode the train to Siberia. I heard the clacking of the wheels, the whistle of the locomotive. I heard my mother open the door and mumble, "Doze off, the poor boy." A few minutes later, I really fell asleep. The fantastic dreams started, the wild adventures. All the fantasies of the day turned into nocturnal visions. That night, I dreamed that I was Rabbi Joseph Della Reina. I uttered God's name, and the daughter of the Grand Vizier came flying to me. She looked like a neighbor's daughter, Ethel, who lived in our house on the third floor. In the dream, I asked Ethel, "What shall we do?" And she replied, "I'll become your bride." I awoke frightened, drenched with sweat. I had often heard my brother and sister talk of love. Suddenly, it became clear to me that I loved Esther. I had heard that novels were written about love, and it occurred to me to name the girl in my book Esther, and that I could become Ben Zion, who saved her from the cannibal and married her. I decided that when I grow up, I would write not just a storybook, but a whole novel about Esther and myself. And that's the end of the story. This story is called The Lantuk. In the summers, my Aunt Yentl liked to tell stories on the Sabbath after the main meal when my Uncle Yosef laid down for a nap. My aunt would take a seat on the bench in front of the house, and the cat, Devosha, would join her. On the Sabbath, the cat would be given the remnants of the Sabbath meal, scraps of meat and fish. Devosha would plant herself at my aunt's feet. She liked to hear my aunt tell stories. From the way she cut her ears and narrowed her eyes, green as gooseberries, it was apparent she understood what my aunt was saying. For the Sabbath, my aunt wore a dress sewn with arabesque and a bonnet with glass beads festooned with green, red, and blue ribbons. Presently, my mother came out, and the two of our female neighbors, Riva and Jandel. I was the last to emerge, and I took a seat on a footstool. Besides the fact that I like to listen to Yentl's stories, sooner or later I would get from her the Sabbath fruit. an apple, a pear, plums. Sometimes she would give me a Sabbath cookie baked with cinnamons and raisins. She always said the same thing when she gave it to me. It'll give you the strength to study. This time the conversation centered on a house demon or a sprite called a Lantuk. And at the end I like to talk about spirits, demons, and hobgoblins, and I heard her say, a Lantuk. Yes, there is such a sprite as a Lantuk. These days, people don't believe in such things, but in my time, they knew that everything can't be explained away with reason. The world is full of secrets. And that is where we are going to pause, and we are going to take our break now. Okay. So, we take a 6-minute break, and then we be back. We find out more about this Lantuk. Okay, so please stay tuned. We will be back in 6.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. The show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back. Okay, so let's find out about. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. I want to wish everybody a Purim Katan Sameach, the little Purim for Adar Aleph. And let's see who we have in the chat room. We forgot to do that earlier. We have Donald, we have Veronica, Marshall, Richard, Simcha, and that looks to be everybody who's in the chat room. I know there's other people watching in the background, so. Okay. Let's find out more about this Lontuk, huh? Okay, so a Lontuk is an imp. But he is not malicious. He causes no harm. On the contrary, he tries to help the members of the household all he can. He is like a part of the family. Usually he is invisible, but sometimes happens that you can see him. Where do they live? Sometimes in a cellar, sometimes in a woodshed, sometimes behind the stove, along with the cricket. Lontuks love crickets. They bring them food, and they understand their language. And when I grow up, I'll learn the language of crickets, I piped up. And Yentl smiled, and with every wrinkle in her face, "My child, this isn't a language that can be learned. Only King Solomon knew the language of beasts. He could talk with the lions, the bears, the wolves, and with all the birds too. But let's get back to the Lontuk. There was a Lontuk at my parents' house. In the summers, he lived in the woodshed, and in the winters, behind the stove. We didn't see him, but sometimes we heard him. One time, when my sister Kayla sneezed, he said, "God bless you." We all heard it. The Lontuk loved all of us, but he loved my sister Kayla most of all. Kayla married and went to live in Lublin with her in-laws. I was only a girl of 8 then. The Lontuk came to her on her last night home to say goodbye. In the middle of the night, Kila heard a rustle and the door opened by itself. The Lontuk came up to Kila's bed and said a rhyme. Wash basin, soak basin, Miklifer, Kugeliter, I'll fret, and you won't forget. Kayla became so frightened that she lost her tongue. He kissed her forehead, and soon after he left. For a long time, Kayla lay there in a daze. Then she lit a candle. Kayla was very fond of almond cake. When my mother, may she rest in peace, baked almond cake for Simchat Torah or Purim, Kayla would nibble half of it away. Anyway, she lit the candle, and on her blanket lay an almond cake still warm from the oven. She started to cry, and we all came running into her. I saw the almond cake with my own eyes. Where the Lontuk got it from, I haven't the slightest idea. Maybe some housewife happened to bake almond cakes and he pinched one. Or maybe they know how to bake them themselves. Kayla didn't want to eat the cake, but she put it away someplace, and it grew hard as a stone. In our town of Yano, there was a teacher who had a sick wife and an only daughter who had been blind from birth. All of a sudden, the teacher died, and the two women were left alone and helpless. There was talk in the town of putting the two women in the poorhouse, but who wants to go to the poorhouse? The paupers there lay on straw pallets right on the bare floor, and the food wasn't good either. When the attendants came to take the mother and daughter to the poorhouse, they both began to lament. Rather than rot away in the poorhouse, we'd sooner die. You can't force anyone to go to the poorhouse. The attendants thought the husband probably left them a few gulden, and so long as they still had some bread, they'll put on airs. When they got hungry enough, they'll thank God there is such a place as the poorhouse. Well, days went by and weeks, and the mother and daughters still didn't give in. The town grew curious. What were they up to? The mother was bedridden and the daughter was blind. There are blind people who can get around, but the teacher's daughter, Zeyde was her name, never strayed beyond her own courtyard. I can see her now, reddish hair, a glowing face, trim limbs. Her eyes were blue and appeared healthy, but she couldn't see a thing. People began to wonder if maybe the mother and daughter had more money than they had been assumed. But that couldn't be. First of all, the teacher had been poor, and second, neither the mother nor the daughter ever left the house. Neither of them was ever seen in any store. Then where did they get food, even if they did have the money? My dear people, there was a lontuk in their house. And when he saw that the breadwinner was gone, and the woman had been left penniless and without a stitch on their backs, he assumed the burden himself. You're laughing. It's nothing to laugh at. He brought them everything they needed. Bread, sugar, herring. He did it all at night. One time a youth walked by their house in the middle of the night, and he heard wood being chopped in the yard. He grew suspicious. Who would be chopping wood in the middle of the night? He opened the gate to the courtyard and saw an axe swinging and chips flying, but there was no one there. It was the lantuk chopping wood for the winter. The next day, when the youth revealed what he had seen, people laughed at him. You probably dreamed it, they said, but it was true. A few weeks later, a shipping agent came back from Lublin, also in the middle of the night. He walked past the well, and he saw the rope descend into the water and a pail full of water coming up. But there was no one around. He promptly realized that this was the work of that band, the creatures of the night. But the shipping agent, Meir David was his name, was a strong person and not easily frightened. He took hold of his ritual fringes, quietly recited, Hear, O Israel, and stopped to see what would happen next. After the unseen one had drawn one pail of water, he drew a second. And then the two pails began to be borne along as if an invisible water carrier was carrying them on a yoke. David Meir followed the pails of water to where the widow and her blind daughter lived. The next day, the shipping agent went to the rabbi and told him what his eyes had seen. This Meir David was an honest man and not one to make up things. A fuss erupted in town. The rabbi summoned the widow and her daughter to him, but the widow was too sick to walk. She couldn't talk either. Soon after, she died. The blind daughter said to the rabbi, Someone provides for us, but who it is I do not know. It must be an angel from heaven. No, it wasn't any angel, but a lantuk. After the mother died, the daughter sold the house and went to live with relatives in Galatia. The lantuk didn't go along, our neighbor Rivka asked. Who knows? As a rule, they don't stir from their house, and Yentl said. They do live forever, Shandel asked. No, no one lives forever, Aunt Yentl replied. It grew silent. I looked at the cat. She had fallen asleep. And Yentl glanced at me. I'll get you the Sabbath fruit now. If a young man wants to study the Torah, he must keep up his strength. And she brought me a Sabbath cookie and 3 plums. And there you go. Now you know what a lantuk is. Okay. Good thing, too, huh? Okay. I think this is going to be the last story for tonight. Okay. It is called Utzel, His Daughter, Poverty. Once there was a man named Wutzel. He was very poor and even more lazy. Whenever anyone wanted to give him a job to do, his answer was always the same. Not today. Why not today? He was asked, and he always replied, why not tomorrow? Wutzel lived in a cottage that had been built by his great-grandfather. The thatched roof needed mending, and although the holes let rain in, they did not let the smoke from the stove out. Toadstools grew on the crooked walls, and the floor had rotted away. There had been a time when mice lived there, but now there weren't any because there was nothing for them to eat. Wutzel's wife had starved to death, but before she died, she had given birth to a baby girl. The name Wutzel gave his daughter was very fitting. He called her Poverty. Wutzel loved to sleep, and each night he went to bed with the chickens. In the morning he would complain that he was tired from so much sleeping, and so he went to sleep again. When he was not sleeping, he lay on his broken-down cot, yawning and complaining. He would say to his daughter, "Other people are lucky. They have money without working. I am cursed." Wutzel was a small man, but his daughter Poverty grew. She spread out in all directions. She was tall, broad, and heavy. At 15, she had to lower her head to get through the doorway. Her feet were the size of a man's and puffy with fat. The villagers maintained that the lazier Wutzel got, the more Poverty grew. Wutzel loved nobody, was jealous of everybody. He even spoke with envy of cats, dogs, rabbits, and all creatures who didn't have to work for a living. Yes, Wutzel hated everybody and everything, but he adored his daughter. He daydreamed that a young, rich man would fall in love with her, marry her, and provide for his wife and her father-in-law. His father-in-law. Her father-in-law. Where did I get that from? I'm not sure where you got it from, but his father-in-law. Okay, so we go on. But not a young man in the village showed the slightest interest in Poverty. When her father reproached the girl for not making friends and not going out with the young men, Poverty would say, "How can I go out in rags and bare feet?" One day, Wutzel learned that a certain charitable society in the village loaned poor people money, which they could pay back in small sums over a long period. Lazy as he was, he made a great effort, got up, dressed, and went to the office of the society. "I would like to borrow 5 gulden," he said to the official in charge. "What do you intend to do with the money?" he was asked. "We lend money only for useful purposes." "I want to have a pair of shoes made for my daughter," Wutzel explained. "If Poverty has shoes, she will go out with the young people of the village, and some wealthy young man will surely fall in love with her. When they get married, I will be able to pay back the 5 gulden. The official thought it over. The chances of anyone falling in love with poverty were pretty slim. Utzel, however, looked so miserable that the official decided to give him the loan. He asked Utzel to sign a promissory note and gave him 5 gulden. Utzel tried to order a pair of shoes for his daughter a few months before. Sandler, the shoemaker, had gone so far as to take Poverty's measurements, but the shoemaker had wanted his money in advance. From the charitable society, Utzel went directly to the shoemaker and asked whether he still had Poverty's measurements. "And supposing I do," Sandler replied. "My price is 5 gulden, and I still want my money in advance." Utzel took out 5 gulden and handed them to Sandler. The shoemaker opened the drawer, and after some searching, brought out the order for Poverty's shoes. He promised to deliver the new shoes in a week, on Friday. Utzel, who wanted to surprise his daughter, did not tell her about the shoes. The following Friday, as he lay on his couch, yawning and complaining, there was a knock on the door, and Sandler came in carrying the new shoes. When Poverty saw the shoemaker with the pair of shiny new shoes in his hand, she cried out in joy. The shoemaker handed her the shoes and told her to try them on. But, alas, she could not get them on her puffy feet. In the months since the measurements had been taken, Poverty's feet had become even larger than they were before. Now the girl cried out in grief. Utzel looked on in consternation. "How is it possible?" he asked. "I thought her feet stopped growing long ago." For a while, Sandler too stood there puzzled. Then he inquired, "Tell me, Utzel, where did you get the 5 gulden?" Utzel explained that he had borrowed the money from the Charitable Loan Society and had given them a promissory note in return. "So, now you have a debt," exclaimed Sandler. "What? That makes you even poorer than you were 4 months ago. Then you had nothing, but today you have 5 gulden less than nothing. And since you have grown poorer, Poverty has grown bigger, and naturally her feet have grown with her. That is why the shoes don't fit. It is all clear to me now." "What are we going to do?" Utzel asked in despair. "There is only one way out for you," Sandler said. "Go to work. From borrowing, one gets poorer, and from work, one gets richer. When you and your daughter work, she will have shoes that fit." The idea of working did not appeal to either of them, but it was even worse to have new shoes and go about barefoot. Utzel and Poverty both decided that immediately after the Sabbath they would look for work. Utzel got a job as a water carrier. Poverty became a maid. For the first time in their lives, they worked diligently. They were kept so busy that they did not even think of the new shoes until one Sabbath morning, Poverty decided she'd try them on again, and lo and behold, her feet slipped easily into them. The new shoes fit. At last, Utzel and Poverty understood that all a man possesses he gains through work, and not by lying in bed and being idle. Even animals were industrious. Bees make honey, spiders spin webs, birds build nests, moles dig holes in the earth, squirrels store food for the winter. Before long, Utzel got a better job. He rebuilt his house and bought some furniture. Poverty lost more weight. She had new clothes made and dressed prettier like the other girls of the village. Her looks improved too, and a young man began to court her. His name was Mahir, and he was the son of a wealthy merchant. Utzel's dream of a rich son-in-law came true, but by then he no longer needed to be taken care of. Love for his daughter had saved Utzel. In his later years, he became so respectable that he was elected a warden of the same charitable loan society from which he had borrowed the 5 gulden. On the wall of his office there hung a string with which Sandler had once measured Poverty's feet, and above it a framed motto: "Whatever you can do today, don't put off till tomorrow." And that, my friends, is the end of our stories for tonight. I hope you enjoyed them. Don't forget tomorrow to watch the rabbis discuss. Should be a really good show because it's going to go on about lost items. And then on Wednesday is the Torah study in depth at 8 p.m. Eastern with Rabbi A. And a special guest, you shall see. And then Friday at 8 p.m. is Kabbalat Ma'ariv Shabbat. And Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. is Shakrit Musaf. And then right back here for Monday. And we continue on with our stories. So until then, everyone, we shall simply say, Laila Tov.